But then it depends. And then there's different types of snow, which I didn't even know was a thing.
We're live. You can keep talking about snow. That's fine.
Yeah, we're just talking about snow right now and how different. I always forget that I have to like shovel the snow and like get it off my car. So if you're in a rush, like it doesn't work. It's pretty to look at. It's pretty to visit. You know, I love like Tahoe, but to live in, it's different. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Here we are, Emancipatory Education Now. It's a student-led initiative here at the SJSU Lurie College of Education, where we critically evaluate systems and structures of oppression in our society's educational systems and advocate for the expansion of emancipatory education research policies and practices. So us as a collective, we defined emancipatory education as being liberating, necessary, autonomous, holistic, affirming, and justice-oriented. So just to give a recap of what the last 2 months have been, Gabi started us off with discussing the benefits of ethnic studies. And that led to Leslye talking about the California Prop 16, which is really important. You know, if you haven't voted already, vote. And then from there, we had Annie discuss the cultures of power in classroom. And I really just appreciate how different all of our topics have been and how interconnected everything is within our education system. And just how different our topics were really shows the socio-political trends in our education system and how it creates cultures such as the one of power. And for my topic, I was really intrigued of what this can look like. So I'm choosing to focus on the restorative approaches that decolonize education and that are trauma-informed in regard to the school cultures implemented and upheld through practices and behavior. So today we'll be focusing on a TED Talk. Her name is Dr. Michelle Chapman. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's titled What Healing the Harm in Schools Look Like. So give me one moment while I'll set that up for us. Is that look okay? Volume okay?
My third grade teacher taught our class a poem that went, good, better, best. Never let it rest until good becomes better and better becomes best. I grew up here in DC and attended public schools, and I loved it. School was safe, was nurturing, we learned and we had fun. A lot has changed in the few years since I've been in school. And our kids are dealing with some things that we never could have imagined. Climate change, school shootings, increased levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Some of our kids are ending their own lives. Many of our kids are hurting. In fact, one study says that 36 million kids in America will face at least one adverse experience before they turn 18. An adverse experience can look like losing a parent to death or incarceration, growing up in a home where there's violence, substance addiction, or an untreated mental illness, or even living in a violent neighborhood. And if a child is one of color or growing up in poverty, they're even more likely to face an adverse experience. This adversity affects our kids' ability to learn. It shows up in schools as disengagement, withdrawal, anger, fights that can become even more violent and result in the loss of life. This is what happened with my 17-year-old brother, Abdullah Coghill. Abdullah and I didn't grow up in the same household. My birth parents separated and divorced and went their separate ways and started new families when I was very young. So I didn't know anything about him until I was an adult. We met through our aunt, I was about 20 and he was about 15 years old. I was nervous about meeting him, but excited at the same time. And when I did, it was love at first sight. He was tall, lean, caramel brown, and fine. That means he was handsome. And he knew it. He had a surplus of charisma that made him popular among the young ladies. Abdullah liked to tinker with electronics, draw, play with the neighborhood kids. We made some great memories together. The last time I saw my brother alive was on a hot DC summer day. We met near the 70 bus stop. I had recently returned from West Africa. We saw each other and exchanged a quick hug and kiss and promised to hook up later so he could hear all about Africa, as he said. And I wanted to tell him, but that day would never come because just a few weeks later, my brother was gone. He was shot and killed while on his way home from a movie date by a young man that he'd had an argument with. He dropped off his young lady and was headed home, but he never made it. A lot of lives changed that day. My brother lost his life. Our family lost a wonderful young man. Our community lost a promising Black youth. And the young lady perhaps lost the dream of going to her senior dance with my handsome brother on her arm. I was an adult when this happened, so I've dealt with a lot of that pain. But many of our kids are facing a similar kind of pain every day. And while they're very young and they need our help, they need healing. I've worked with kids and youth for over 25 years as a youth counselor, tutor, mentor, after-school program director, summer camp director, you name it. Now I'm a professor of juvenile justice. And my work really focuses on creating conditions in communities and schools that help young people thrive so they don't end up in the justice system. I've become very fascinated lately with restorative approaches as a way to support young people and communities. Restorative practices are a set of skills and processes grounded in values. And when we adopt these values and practices, they change the way we interact with one another. These approaches have been practiced by Indigenous peoples in New Zealand, North America, and even parts of Africa as a way of life. When we adopt them, I think they have transformative potential. Schools around the world are using restorative approaches. In the United States, schools in Denver, Oakland, and here in Washington, D.C., are using these practices to help support youth and enable them to thrive. I'm convinced that we need a restorative revolution. I'd like to share with you today a few values that are core to restorative approaches: connection, care, and repair. Values that we can all buy into. Connection. Connection is really about relationships and preventing harm by focusing on our relatedness. We all exist within an intricate web of relationships with ourselves, with each other, and with the earth. When we focus on connection, we cultivate belonging. And when people have a sense of belonging, they're less likely to harm each other. And when they do, they're more invested in repairing that harm. Connection in schools looks like kids engaged in a mindfulness activity or a centering practice. It looks like a morning meeting where the school community gathers and they can share their recent victories or even things they're challenged with. It looks like the entire school community practicing empathy, patience, and compassion. Care. Care is about showing up. Care is about understanding that when we're in deep relationships, it's all of our job to make sure everyone is safe so we can all thrive. So it's about accepting the responsibility of creating real community. And when people are in conflict, care says we all play a role in helping them resolve that conflict. The peace circle process is one way of doing that. In the peace circle, we gather with our supporters, our family, our faith leaders, our teachers, principals, even social workers. We sit facing one another. Sometimes a centerpiece is in the middle of the circle. It could be a vase of flowers, photos of family members, or a ceremonial object. It helps us remember that we're connected to one another, that the circle is sacred, and so are we. The talking piece is passed around from person to person so that there's equity of voice, and we bear witness to one another's stories, and we work together to resolve problems. Often we find when we do peace circles with young people, they're in conflict, they're in crisis. They need our support. Families need our support, not our stigmatization. I wonder if Abdullah and this young man that killed him had an opportunity to sit in a peace circle, perhaps that situation would have resolved differently. Perhaps my brother would still be here. I also think about the rise in school shootings we've seen lately. And I wonder, had we created more connection and more care with students, between schools and families and communities and service providers, could we have saved more lives? We're fallible human beings. We hurt each other. That's why the value of repair is essential. Because it says that we understand healing is part of the process because recovery is the norm. Kids in our schools are being hurt every day because of their sex or gender identity, because they speak with an accent, because they're Muslim. We need to stop this hurting in schools and adopt restorative approaches to build real community. And there's something else happening in schools that really causes harm. And that's when we rely upon suspension and expulsion as a disciplinary measure. Mm-hmm. A suspension sends a message that you don't belong here. And we know in this field that just one suspension can increase a child's chances of dropping out of school altogether, which then makes them more vulnerable to justice system involvement, where we know youth of color are already overrepresented. In fact, there's one study that says preschool children, Black children, make up about 17% of all the preschool enrollment in the country. Yet they comprise about 48% of preschool suspensions, almost half. Another study says that Black girls are suspended at 7 times the rate of white girls in elementary school. And high school students, Black students are suspended at twice the rate of their white peers. There are even studies that show that Black children, for boys age 10, girls age 5, are perceived as being older, less innocent, and less in need of nurturing than their white peers. As a mother, auntie, godmother, and cousin to Black children and youth, this hurts. Because it tells me that our hidden race and gender biases, probably more than kids' behavior, plays a role in determining who gets suspended from schools. And we've got to take responsibility for that. Fortunately, restorative approaches are helping us examine the discipline disparity in schools, because all children deserve to be equally valued, safe, and truly supported. It's been a while since my brother's death. I've thought about him countless times, wondering what kind of young man would he have become? Maybe an engineer, maybe an entrepreneur. Maybe he would have given me more nieces and nephews to love and buy gifts for. Surely he would have traveled the world. And yes, he would have seen Africa, because I would have taken him. I can't answer any of those questions, and I can't bring my brother back. But what I can do is help create spaces for healing for others. Here at my institution, I offer a weekly mindfulness session for faculty, students, and staff so we can come together in community and breathe and restore ourselves. My work with youth and communities also involves spoken word, mindfulness, restorative circles, poetry, to help us build community and heal. And I belong to a wonderful organization that promotes contemplative approaches in education, so that classrooms, even on the college level, can be spaces where students and faculty feel human. Dr. Fania Davis, a restorative justice pioneer, says that we need warriors and healers now, because ours is a system that hurts people who hurt people, to show that hurting people is wrong. I say, let's stop the hurting. I say, let's stop the harming and let's begin the healing. The restorative revolution needs you. We need your energy. We need your gifts. What can you do? You can connect. Connect with yourself first. Figure out what it is that makes you feel whole and restored and nurtured. Gardening, painting, fishing, being in nature, singing. Whatever it is, do it on a regular basis. Many of us are exhausted and overworked. I know, I'm a teacher, which is even more reason why we need to tend to our own restoration. And then connect with others. Connect with young people. Connect with them in a deep and authentic way. My mother tried to teach all of the kids in our family how to crochet, girls and boys. And when she had them sitting next to her and they were working together and she was feeding them homemade baked goods, she'd say, "What's going on with you? How's school? What's bothering you? What do you need from me?" Restorative approaches can look like families being present to and for one another. Deepen your care. Put yourself in places where you can really serve. Support organizations doing this work. Empower your school, your neighborhood school, your community center with restorative practices. Become trained to lead circles yourselves. And repair. Join us as we disrupt the narratives, policies, and practices that harm kids. Help us transform schools into places of equity and learning, where everyone can thrive. We need you. We need you to do this work. We all need to be not just advocates for restorative approaches, but real models of restorative approaches. Join us. Let's be the restorative revolution so that we can work together to bring out the good, the better, and the absolute best in all of our children. Thank you.
All right. Whew. Welcome back. I also want to say, why is that me? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. I just have to throw out there, that was so awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Annie. I'm really glad that you enjoyed that. I also feel like I got ahead of myself in that moment. Like, I didn't even let you guys introduce yourselves. So let's backtrack a little bit. Annie, do you want to go first since you spoke?
Okay. So my name is Annie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a master's student in the Counselor Education program at San Jose State.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vinson. My pronouns are they and he, and I'm an undergrad student at San Jose State.
Hi, I'm Leslye Tinson. I'm a second-year doctoral student in educational leadership, and my pronouns are she and her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabi. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm an undergraduate student in the sociology department.
Great. Thank you all for doing that. I definitely got ahead of myself there. But Annie, I heard you say that the TED Talk was amazing for you. Was there any other words that everyone else can use to describe the TED Talk, or what came up for you?
One really important word that stood out to me from the TED Talk was definitely creating relationship-centered schools where students feel like, oh, like it feels like a sense of family, a sense of community and support. So that really stuck out to me, how when she was describing the different ways schools can incorporate those practices such as restorative justice circles and other strategies as well.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. It really highlighted the importance of relationships, not just within the family system, but what that can look like in our educational system. So thank you.
Every time I hear the different statistics associated with school suspensions, I always ask why, and then I always come up with it doesn't have to be this way, right? So our investment in suspension should not be what it is. Our investment should be in figuring out ways to make sure that kids stay in school as opposed to ways to get them put out of school. And so that for me always feels very sad. Like students are supposed to be able to go to these places to learn, and yet, some students don't even have the access point to be there at a regular time. So when we even get to talking about relationships, what are we already communicating? A lack of desire to want to be a relationship partner with that student and their families, and so that always feels very unfortunate for me.
Yeah, I agree, Leslye. It is really sad to see like the disproportionate rates. That was actually something I wrote down, that Black students make up 17% of our student population, yet they account for 48% of the suspension or expulsion rates. And that doesn't even begin to cover like the rates in preschools, and that's something that's new to me. That's something that I hadn't really thought about until this year. And it's still like what you said, Leslye, like why is this even a trend in the first place? So that leads me to where Dr. Chapman says schools were safe, fun, and full of learning. How do you think schools continue to do that, or how do they not do that?
We've heard about different types of learning. And for example, students that are more tactile or kinesthetic, right? They're going to need a lot more physical engagement with different types of items. So, and they might, have strengths when it comes to outdoor activities and things like that. And we spend a lot of our time indoors. We spend a lot of the classroom time at desks and in chairs. And, in college, it gets even more silent and more sedentary, right? So I think that that's one opportunity that we might have as far as like not simply seeing maybe the younger grades as suitable for that type of learning and that type of style, but that we could incorporate more of physical engagement into learning. Everything doesn't have to be so cerebral in nature, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So have like the incorporation of like multi-sensory. Thank you, Leslye. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with Leslye. I think physical movement is a big part of being able to have fun as a kid, and like being able to get out of just looking at a book or looking at a board all day. And I think some schools could do better at this, because I've heard about some schools not even having recess, like some kids not even having recess. And I'm like, how can that be the case for a second grader? That's what my teacher was saying, that her niece and nephew are like 8 and 9 or 10, and they don't have recess, which is just totally wild to me. But I think if schools could also just incorporate that into learning too, like more hands-on stuff. Like if you're doing like math stuff, you can use blocks, or you can use something for them to really help conceptualize what's happening. And also, I know she talks about this later, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but mindfulness is also a big part of that too.
Yes. Annie, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with both of you, Gabi and Leslye, that different learning styles should definitely be taken into account, and also just to give a little bit more variety and break up the monotony that is like the current school day. Also, I just want to point out, like in addition to the like overrepresentation of Black students, for example, in like suspensions and expulsions, they specifically, or the speaker, I believe, Dr. Chapman, specifically noted, suspensions in preschools. And I just wonder, what call does anyone have to suspend any preschooler ever? Like, I mean, I don't think it's good at any age, but like, to me, that just shows how dedicated we are to this certain system rather than the outcomes in the development of the students. Because developmentally at preschool, I just can't think of like what kind of benefit suspending them would have, really at any. But I mean, at preschool, man, that detail really stuck out to me. And another thing that I was going to mention, oh man, it's gone right now. I was thinking of it in terms of, oh yes, ties to the community. And Dr. Chapman mentioned community a lot in her talk. And one of my professors, shout out to Professor Sheckman, if you were to ever watch this, he does a lot of emphasis on ties to the community as a way to have students be more invested in learning. And he's even shown us some documentaries about school programs where projects are based around the community and focuses students on certain like issues within their community and how they can contribute to making it better. And not only does it form more ties with the people around them and help people feel more connected to the people in their community, it also feels directly relevant to them, and it shows them that education is about can be about you. It can feel directly relevant to you rather than just kind of these like topics in dusty old textbooks. So I think that could be a really important element, and the community benefits from it as well, having these students actively engaged in local issues. So I just think on all fronts, that could definitely make schools a better place for learning.
Thank you, Annie. You definitely said a lot. And oh my God, my mind just like wants to talk about everything. But when you mentioned about the preschool suspension rates, Dr. Chapman notes that even one increases chances of dropout. So just think about that, like one. And if a preschooler is like experiencing this, like what does it say? Like, what if they start to internalize that, in a very young age? Or like, what does it say about the schools? Like, what messages are they getting from their educational support system or lack of?
I mean, these schools were not built with us in mind. They were not spaces that were created for Black children. So when I hear those things, when I see it happen locally, sadly, I'm not surprised because, as Annie said, this is how the system is set up. We're not interested in educating Black kids. We're not invested in making sure that everyone has the same type of opportunity. And, so much so that you're threatened by a 5-year-old, and so invested in punishment as learning instead of education as learning, right? We could look at how it unfolds into our prison industrial complex, right? And how this fits and serves a certain financial purpose for our country and for our state. What are the benefits of like rank and file compliance and obedience to authority, to the degree that, you won't even try to assert your own freedoms and rights and ability to be a human full of joy and all the other emotions that we should be able to experience, you know? And so when you're literally trying to knock that out of a 5-year-old, like, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing? And so I don't want to just say that as if there's like one simple solution to it. I think that there are some teachers that are invested in, you know, keeping things as is. I think there are some teachers that, in fact, I know there are some teachers that don't want to teach every type of kid. I know that there are school systems and districts that aren't invested in serving all the kids in the community. And it's not right, you know, it's not fair. And so then the people that actually do achieve outside of all of those barriers and hurdles that they experience will still have to deal with the stuff around, oh, you must have got in because of a, you know, racial quota or something like that, when it really is like, you literally surpassed all these obstacles and hurdles, and that's something to be celebrated, because those things shouldn't even be there in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that's what I gotta say.
Yeah. I think Vinson's going to be talking about the school prison complex a little bit more next time. So I don't want to touch too much into that, but yes, I can't wait for that because I really want to talk about that. So going back to Dr. Chapman, when she's talking about like restorative revolution and their cores, and the 3 that she mentioned were connection, care, and repair. And, you know, just hearing you talk about what you just mentioned, Leslye, like, it's like when we're basically setting up students to like fail or not, just like having an awareness of these things that really shouldn't like impact them the way that they do. So what are some things that look like connecting and care and repairing that you've seen, or something that your colleague has done, or that you have experienced in your schooling system?
I have a really great example. When I worked at an elementary school in the Alum Rock School District, the 5th grade teachers actually implemented restorative circles for the 5th graders because they realized that class was in, like the 5th grade class was impacted by a lot of trauma, just like, you know, different things with the family. And it was like I don't like saying bad behavior, but it was just like, you know, not desirable behavior, you know, like bullying, a lot of bullying going on in the classroom, a lot of calling names, and it had been happening over the course of a couple years.
And this was 4th grade?
5th grade, but there had been like a serial bully, you know, that had really been beating up on people, but they were just impacted by a lot of things. I'm not going to go into like all their different situations, but they decided that it would be helpful to do restorative circles. So they started it that year. And it was so interesting because I think after 2 months of doing it, the students, when they were upset, they were like, we want to do a circle now. Like, I'm upset, I want to do a circle now. And I think it was really cool because I know I touched about this before, but we also had a kid in that class that had transition too. And they were able to talk about the different kind of things and help them understand how a kid might be feeling and how to be more inclusive. And then just how to be more mindful of their language as well. So I thought it was really awesome. And I definitely applaud those teachers because they had been teaching for like 20, 30 years. So these are like old school teachers, but they were like, this is what we got to do in order for it to work. And I think it worked pretty well.
I love that. Thank you, Gabi.
A couple of years ago, I was looking for the name of the school, but I know there was an elementary school in Baltimore, Maryland that started a meditation room. So anytime a student had, you know, some kind of disruptive behavior, however that was loosely defined, they were sent to this room and were able to meditate and stretch and take naps and other things. And as a result, by the end of that school year, they had 0% suspensions. Right?
Wow.
And so this is like one school doing the right thing, right? But how important and how compelling it was for them to see that happen simply by creating a space and funneling students into that space so that they could be more aware of their bodies and their feelings and emotions, and have a space where they are able to, hone in on those skills, I think is very important. And so that was implemented at an elementary school in Baltimore.
They actually did that at the elementary. I feel like the principal was just awesome at the school I worked at, but they did it for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. They brought in people to help them teach them like yoga. So they were learning about deep breaths. And when they like felt themselves, like there were a couple kids that would say like, I'm going to take my dragon breaths or whatever the lady had called them. And I mean, I don't know about like how it impacted the different discipline statistics or whatever, but working with the kids, I did see the difference. They were a lot calmer after coming into that class. And like you said, Leslye, it's important to do the body scans, like know where you're feeling it in your body. Because some kids are just like, I just got upset and I just like ran out of the classroom and I don't really know why. And it's just like being able to recognize when you're getting upset is actually a skill that needs to be taught, and also how to calm yourself down. Because a lot of times kids will be like, I don't even know what happened. I just kind of lost it. Like,
yeah. And in turn, we also have to make sure that the adults have that emotional awareness as well, right? There could be a kid that we taking some stuff out on because of our own, right? So yeah, it should be a collaborative thing. I didn't want to say the suggestion and make it seem like it's only the kids that need to do this work.
Yeah, it's who's leading them in these in these circles and stuff. And just drawing from both of your examples, like it really shows when you take the time to develop a culture within a school, students pick up on that inclusivity, like they want that connection. And when you take the time to understand them as people first, then I feel like they can really thrive. Dr. Chapman also says that 36 million in the US will face at least one ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences, and that the pain progresses in unhealthy and unsafe ways for an individual and their systems, that are their families, communities, and society. So I think just hearing just our discussion today, like it's really important to see new ways of being able to connect with our students as people first, and the whole mindfulness, the healing circles, that's really important. I've been to a few this year and I'm like, wow, like they're so powerful. I'm over here saying I love you to a stranger and I'll never see them in my life again, but just having that connection and just being in those situations where you can connect with others, it's really important. Vinson, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, definitely. I've been in restorative justice circles as well, and I find them really interesting because sometimes, when people react emotionally too fast, you don't get the chance to take the time to process what you're thinking. And definitely students from a young age, if we teach kids about their feelings from a young age and they can identify it, it would give them a greater sense of awareness later on too, and that could help with some of, the behavioral things as well. And I was kind of thinking about something earlier, but I think I forgot about it. I remember Gabi mentioned something about recess, and I was thinking, how people actually look down upon recess, for some reason, schools, when, there's an assembly or something that goes overtime, the first thing they cut is recess time. So then I'm like, if play is so important to learning, why is that the first thing that's being cut? And not only that play is really important, students also learn a lot of different things from play as well, interacting with other people, social emotional development. So it's really important because sometimes when you're sitting in the classroom, you're learning academic stuff, but beyond the classroom, there are so many ways to develop personally and professionally as well.
Yeah, sportsmanship, good competitiveness, but not sore loser,
Yeah, being assertive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all these examples really show the importance of socio-emotional learning. And just a little bit more about the whole body movement. I don't know if you're familiar with the body keeps score. No, yeah, Leslye. Well, it talks about how like our bodies store trauma. And, and I think tying that into what Vinson mentioned about like PE and body movement, or like how someone else mentioned too, like it's really important just to like let that let your body release its own tension in its own way. And just having like different approaches to learning instead of just like my brain has to be on all the time. There is different ways. So yeah, what else?
Mhm.
Are you guys
So
gonna say anything? Okay.
Well, so I just think like from what all of you have been saying, it's just demonstrating how important connection is for everybody, for all students at every age, and especially in moments when students are struggling and when they're in a place that might cause them to act out, then that is a moment where they really need time and care and investment and connection. And in response to that, we do the exact opposite. We take all of those things away from them and send them on a path of not having that care and attention. And one thing that I love that Dr. Chapman said was, we are in a system that hurts people who hurt people to show that hurting is wrong. So rather than trying to like heal any potential hurt and understand it, we just perpetuate hurt. And that is the current system that exists, especially with things like suspension and expulsion, even not allowing kids to have recess. That was happening at a school where I was at. Like some teachers, if the kid didn't turn in their homework last night, then they have to miss recess to finish it. So it's like students who are already struggling and really need care and attention, we withdraw them and separate them from it even more. So I think that's why it's so important to take this stance of like healing and restoration whenever there's hurt and pain. So thank you so much for this topic, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. That I had a quote written down that Dr. Chapman mentions, that healing is part of the process because recovery is the norm. And I was like, wow, like that's so true. Like, and Annie, what you just said, it's just like this cycle that keeps on going. And it's like, I think that's where socio-emotional learning comes from, or like the trauma-informed practices and restorative justice. It all ties into attempting to break these cycles. But as Leslye mentioned, like this wasn't set up for us. So it's like, okay, like where are ways that we can make it for us and about us to really see us like thrive and succeed. And something else that stuck out to me, like she mentioned it, how it's like an Indigenous way of life, like really thinking about life being sacred. And it's happened worldwide, where like studies have seen restorative justice like succeed. And she also touches on it being seen in like Denver and Oakland and DC, where she's based from. So that kind of or was there any other comments someone wanted to make?
I like what Annie said about connection. Like I think like the other ways we discipline, they're like really devoid of humanity, and you don't have a connection with the kids. Like you can't expect the kid to listen to you or learn from you if they don't have a connection with what they're learning, with the classroom, with the teacher. And it really, like, I think I like the restorative things because when you started, I'm sure if you guys have participated, it's like you first build up to that. Like you don't go straight into the deep stuff. You build a base of connection so you can, and I think that's just so important, because I think you want to connect, I think, with the good and also with the bad. Like I think a lot of times we're only connecting with kids when we're disciplining them, but we should also connect with them in a positive way, like in ways of fun and ways of joy. So
Yes, thank you.
Annie made me think.
That leads, Vincent, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, adding back to Annie's point, definitely like instead of, educators like disciplining like students and punishing them for not turning in their homework, maybe check in with the student and be like, hey, like, is there anything I can do to support you with this? you know, like maybe like, you know, give them a chance to talk about like maybe why they didn't do their homework, instead of like, I remember being like thrown in like a cold like classroom on like the like corner of, on the outside of our campus, just to like be called like, it was called the homework room. So basically that's what they did to punish students who didn't do their homework, and the room would always be filled and it was cold, which is kind of sad. But, you know, some schools do that, but we got to start changing those systems.
See, you have space to make a homework room, but you don't have a space to make like a mindfulness room. Like, really? Man.
Yeah.
I talk all night about this.
We just have to really unthink the punitive nature of schooling, right? I mean, you didn't do something, now there must be punishment. You didn't do this, now there must be punishment, you know? And even at the college level, right? That's looking at a syllabus and rethinking our policies and procedures. You know, the registrar's office charging people late fees. I mean, everything is punitive. Or maybe it's not the registrar's, a financial aid, whoever it is that puts the bills together, right? So whether it's late fees or processing stuff, or, you know, needing to make some kind of change to a paperwork and having to pay for that, right? All of this stuff is connected. And so to the extent that individual teachers and professors can decide how to run their classrooms in ways that are not centered around punitive means of human reaction and response, I think is going to be crucial.
Yeah, Leslye, you said a word right now, unlearn, and it led me to like the whole thing about like unlearning and unraveling, but replacing that with new ways of learning and approaches. And I think that's kind of like where we are in our educational system, like hopefully, because it is very much, you know, politics, unfortunately. And I think just within our collective, you know, it really shows how important it is to have different people in different roles who really care and really want to see change and really want to see us implement new ways and really help our students succeed. So I'm really excited to have like met y'all and have been able to talk about these things, because it's what's that word? When you like, when it shows something's about to happen. Okay, never mind.
Foreshadow?
Foreshadow, yep.
Got it. No, I was going to say
Gabi.
what Leslye was saying. I think like the way I think about punitive punishment is that it's kind of lazy. Like I remember reading something, and it's like a lot of like the reasons for suspension are unruly behavior and like really broad categories. So teachers aren't taking the time, and I'm not trying to put the blame totally on teachers, but I'm saying they're not taking the time to understand what the problem is, what the root of the problem is, and do something that's actually helpful. It's just get out of my classroom. I'm writing a referral. So it was like a crazy number because I did my project on this last year, and yeah, and I just think it's a lazy way. So I think it will take more effort to implement these restorative practices, but I think they're worth it. And I'd also like to mention we have so many students attending schools with like a police presence on campus, but no counselor.
Yeah.
I remember it was like 300K or 400K students. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. I can try and see if I can find it, but there's this article that describes a peace circle that took place in a school, and there was an officer present at the peace circle, and then a student felt really overwhelmed and got up and walked away, and then the officer literally is pushing her down and back into her seat and bringing her back and everything. And there's just so much wrong with that.
Wow. Yeah. So I live in the Twin Cities currently, and after George Floyd's life was taken, I saw a lot of people, like educators, go to school boards and try to defund the police presence in their schools. They're called school resource officers here. And they won. They pushed back and they were like, nope, we don't want this. And to see that like change start to happen. I'm like, wow, like I'm really curious to see what that's going to be like.
Jackie,
Yeah.
they also did that in Oakland. So that like it's been happening in other school districts. And I think Alamark School District also, I don't know, they like cut their police contracts. So
Nice.
I think after it started in Minneapolis, a lot of people were, I think it gave it momentum.
Yeah, for sure.
People were working on it before. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the necessity of being heard, right? These things, these fights have long been going on, and I think, you know, when these injustices have happened, they haven't resulted in the kinds of punitive repercussions that we have come to normally expect of other people. So, you know, I'm happy in the few communities where the voices have risen up and actually been listened to, that there's been some shift. But you know, it needs to happen at a much larger scale, right? Because too many children are being negatively affected. And we're giving over a level of trust that has not been earned or deserved, and has resulted in a series of disrespectful acts towards students in schools and in the community at large. So we absolutely need to reallocate resources to things that matter.
Yes, things that matter. Absolutely. Whew. Well, thank you all for participating. I would like to close this off with a few call to actions. My number one is exploring your own mindfulness and your own self-care, and really emphasizing that it's for everyone. You know, take the time to see what that looks like for you, especially all of us who work in the education system. You know, we're so used to giving and, you know, gotta make sure you're good too. A second one, just kind of what our collective was talking about today, is to critically think of your own personal experiences. What went well? Where was there room for growth? What was something that you needed and or wanted in your academic experiences? And third, to connect with yourself and with others, and to really, I'm a big person to like lead with compassion and, like, you know, try to find ways of connecting, you know, because we all have our own personal biases, you know, with our own experiences, and really just to make the effort to connect with others. So on that note, thank you so much, everyone, and have a good night.
thank you, Jackie. This was awesome.